Just a reminder, companies can be good for customers and bad for employees. I'm thinking right now, currently, with the products of Namco Bandai. They have Tekken, they have Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. These are really big products. With Tekken recently, they just did do good for making a marketing mishap when it comes to pricing of a stage, and they're giving people a free stage and some extra cosmetics. Sparking Zero, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, is doing phenomenally well sales wise and is an overall positive product. And at the same time of all that, I believe there's over 200 employees who are currently experiencing layoffs at Namco Bandai. As far as I know, these aren't considered actual layoffs. It's a Japanese practice where they force people to do their shifts without no actual work, making them quit essentially. And that's ultimately bad. I think that's ultimately bad. That's unfortunate. Anytime somebody loses their job, that's an awful thing. At the same time as that, the products are very positive and are really, really popular right now. As much as you can be a fan of Nintendo, Capcom, any company, really, there's a high likelihood of mistreatment happening at that company in some capacity.
If you don't like Pokemon, don't play Pokemon. Every single time one of these stupid games comes out, there's two people. There's the people who play them and it's like, yeah, cool, it's Pokemon, we know it's got its flaws, whatever. And then there's people who are just incessant and complain about what the game experience is. And at this point, it's just like, dude, you are an adult. You know there's alternatives to Pokemon, multiple at this point. Why are you continuing to suffer and complain about things when it doesn't matter? Like, look, you got the Persona games, you got the Shin Megami Tensei series. Obviously, that's got other JRPG stuff, but monster collecting is still part of that experience. If you want something a little bit closer, there's the Digimon series. All those Digimon games, just look at them. It's Pokemon adjacent. A little bit more focus on relationships with your creatures, that kind of shit, but it's the same shit. Finally, there's Power World. Okay, you don't need to be playing Pokemon to do a monster catching simulation. And frankly, all of these have great designs in them. Obviously, some real stinkers in all of them as well. But so does Pokemon. You don't have to play the most popular thing in the world. Just play what you want to play. Just play what you want to play. There's a reason why there's multiple different versions of the genre. Even if Nintendo wants to make it illegal or whatever. Digimon exists, Power World exists, Persona exists. Just play those. Yeah, I'd rather play Nino Kuni than Pokemon. With the amount of monster catching games, and the amount of complaining and frustration with the Pokemon fan base with lack of change towards their series, I don't get it. This is not the case of like an NBA 2K or Madden fan. I guess a little bit less so with Madden, where there is a singular monolith of a type of video game. There's only so many of a sports simulation video games. I get that. But Pokemon, there are alternatives. There has consistently been alternatives to what the genre is on a gameplay front, with the exception, and I will give the exception to the competitive Pokemon players, but I want to be clear and stress this: the competitive Pokemon players are not the main fan base. They are the hardcore of the hardcore. That's an unchangeable fact. Sorry. But to the numerous players of the Pokemon games who are there for the monster collecting and having fun with that kind of stuff, there are alternatives. There has consistently been alternatives. There has been unique and like cool stuff in that space for such a long time that it's worthwhile to explore those spaces instead of incessantly complain about the big franchise when there's so much more. Like, you can just play the Dragon Quest Monsters game. You can play the Monster Hunter Stories game. Nino Kuni 1 and 2. Also, gorgeous games, might I add. There's just so much in the space. There is just so much in the space that explores what the space can be, what the gameplay thing can be, what the. It's just so much. There's just so much going on in the entire genre, and people aren't giving that enough credit. That's all. And that's what happens every time with this Pokemon game. Not enough is talked about what the alternatives are. Not enough is discussed about what you could play instead.
I think it's really interesting in this time of like $70 games, big budgets, massive failures, giant studio mishaps. That game like Vampire Survivors that costs $5 is doing so spectacularly well, even to this day. That game is so incredibly impressive, and the fact that they're now doing Castlevania characters in that game, it's like, God, I haven't played it. I highly recommend Vampire Survivors. It's a super fun game. It's like a reverse bullet hell. Essentially, you're just shooting and chucking projectiles, barraging the screen. It's great. It's super fun. And it's super cheap. It's very impressive what they're able to do on such a small budget. And honestly, it being so cheap for so long, I think has helped it last so long. They've continued to support it throughout the years with like little bits of DLC, and now they're adding that Castlevania one. It's been cool. I think people with big budget games usually do forget that there's a lot of indie stuff that's really cool. We're losing a lot of the mid tier games, but there's still like a really cool amount of indie games. I will say, as much as I like Vampire Survivors, I don't know if this could be its own genre. Vampire Survivors itself is, flipping the script on an old time genre that's been around for a very long time. There's been so many bullet hells throughout the years, and reversing that into its own thing is very unique. But I do feel like there is very much limitations to that becoming its own genre. Of course, I understand people saying like, "Oh, you could change the aesthetic to make it more like a sci-fi shooter or something like that," and that I do understand. But ultimately, what I think makes it stand out is there's nothing like Vampire Survivors. I think as soon as there's more than like I don't know 3 to 5 versions of Vampire Survivors that are huge, the game itself loses its magic. I think there's only so many times you can make the same scenario of a billion things happening on screen, and you are the one making that. It's a really, really fun power fantasy, but it's one of those things where I don't know if it can have longevity in multiple iterations, other than its own series. Maybe I'm short sighted on this. Maybe this is going to be the next biggest thing, but for me personally, I don't know.
Okay, comparing the consumers of a cockfighting product to factory farming is like some weird PETA wet dream. Like, I understand the internet's hyperbole the place, but like, dude, this is a game where you catch little mouses and make them fight. A loyalty to a brand, loyalty to a singular product, I think it's bad. It will always be bad. I do not support it in any possible way. But getting so upset and so insulted at the mere suggestion that you should play maybe something for outside of that franchise that is doing similar stuff or at least in the same vein, and this being like the average response of like, how dare you defend Pokemon, how dare you take away my fun, it's not the same thing, it's not the same thing. I'm not saying any of the things I have suggested are the same thing. I'm not. I'm saying they're better. I'm saying they're different. And my problem is people being so upset with a product and not being able to let that go. That's my problem. I don't care how deep of a Pokemon fan you are. I don't care how many plushes you have. I don't care how many games you've had in your collection. I don't care about any of that. You, as an individual, everybody, does not have to buy a product because they are part of a fan base. Ever. Now, I mean, ever. You just don't have to do that. And that is my problem. And that is continuing my problem with this fan base, a consistent clamoring for change from the developers who have not changed in 20 years, and then merely given the suggestion of them changing themselves and changing their buying habits, changing their spending habits, changing, you know, what they do with their spare time. Overblown. Freak out. Absolute freak out. And frankly, like that I think is ridiculous.